Yeah, we're live, 7:05. Once again, nailed the rhyme. Did I wait for that, or did it actually just happen by accident? It's probably more the second thing. I'm not really clever enough to schedule that out to make that work. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it happens just by accident. Some of the good things, some of the best things in life happen by accident. Tonight we're going to talk about an intake or a video that I have coming up, where this will be the first time I've done a video. You can see I got a nice scratch. We took the dog swimming today. They were clawing. The first time that I've run a video kind of the test, an intake test on the fast Lsxhr intake manifold, so that they're high RAMI version of that. So you guys have probably seen this, and a lot of guys have wanted and asked about this intake manifold. When I just did all the LS3 intake manifolds with the guys at Brian Toohey Racing, we tested a bunch of them. I don't know, 6 or 8 of them or whatever. But whenever we do, it's not like, hey, this is, well, we did get a lot of this is great. This is good information. But we also get, hey, why didn't you do this intake? Why didn't you do this intake? Why didn't you do this intake manifold? And one of them that they mentioned quite often was that the fast Lsxhr. And this test actually is on an LS7. So it's an LS7 headed LS7 instead of an LS3 headed LS7 like we ran the other ones on. So we can't directly compare it, because not only does it have LS7 heads, it also has, we can't directly compare it to all the results that we got on the LS3 stuff. LS7 heads and a different camshaft. So we're gonna, what we're doing is basically just taking a look at LS7 intake manifolds, and we're comparing those. So the three that I'm looking at are, the three that look interesting to me are the high RAM, that fast Lsxhr, and then maybe the MSD intake manifold. Those are all fairly common, intake upgrades, particularly the MSD for, stuff that needs to fit under the hood and for your normal kind of modification that you're not running like lots and lots of engine speed with. So it will be an interesting comparison, and it'll show, like we've seen lots of these things show before. Long runners do what long runners do, short runners do what short runners do. But the interesting thing is when we have two designs that are, I would call, somewhat similar, like the high RAM and that fast manifold, how do those two compare? And the only way to know that for sure is to actually do a direct back-to-back test and, make sure all the things are the same on it. And once again, this is a good motor. This is a 700 plus horsepower motor to test them on. So, it should have some good stuff. So the poll for tonight will be let's see. That's not spelled correctly. Who wants to see dyno results of an LS7 version of the fast Lsxhr intake run on the dyno? So who wants to see that? Don't we all want to see it? Don't we all want to see dyno results? And the thumbnail that I put up is, and I'll go ahead and I can show you guys that so you can see what we're talking about here. So this is what I'm talking about. So this is the intake manifold. This is actually the carbon PTR version of that fast Lsxhr. This is an all carbon fiber version. This is the super, double throwdown, much more pricey than the composite. The fast is a composite version of this manifold. I don't know how much difference. I need to ask the performance design guys. I don't know if there's any difference in the power output of that, but we ran this intake manifold, and I did a bunch of testing on it way back when I did the LS3 intake shootout. And this even had adjustable runners in it, so we could change the runners. And then we also took this lid and just pulled it off to run it as an IR manifold when I did that test. So that was cool stuff. But that's the manifold, and that's essentially what that fast Lsxhr is. And this one was an LS3 version, but the one that we're going to put the video up on is an LS7 version. So kind of cool stuff. And the carbon fiber version was had me worried a little bit when it arrived. I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably way too nice for me to be testing. Even though the engine was not your typical junkyard engine, one of the test motors was an actual crate LS3. Thanks again for going way back years and years to the guys at Gander Chevrolet for supplying that. They gave me a good deal on it. I bought it, but they gave me a good deal. And also the next motor was a 416. So it wasn't your typical junkyard stuff. So I didn't feel so bad putting that manifold on either one of these motors because they were actually fairly nice looking. They weren't going to get, junkyard grease and grime and rat droppings and all that stuff on there. So I didn't feel too bad, but I just didn't want to scratch it or drop it or anything because it's, that's like for me, that's like car money. That's a whole car. But it worked really well. And you can see it if you take a look at the videos, you can see the dyno results of all of that stuff. And it's interesting. And this might be something, this might be our next poll for tomorrow. So remind me, the guys that are here tomorrow, the poll that I want to do is, would you guys like to see, a lot of times when I do these videos, I'll do a video of, for instance, on that LS3 intake manifold shootout, we did the comparison of an LS3 intake manifold versus each one of them. So would you guys like during the live feed, I could go grab dyno results and, hey, Richard, I want to see the Super Victor 4500 versus the Super Victor 4100 because you didn't show that. All you did was show each of them compared to the LS3. I want to see the fast versus the MSD, or, you get what I'm talking about. The high RAM versus the Super Victor, or those kinds of things. That way, you could essentially have access to the things that some of the stuff that I have access to, and I can show it to you. You go, yeah, look at this comparison. We can kind of see what's going on here. So during the live feed, we will be able to cover some of that stuff. So let me know if you guys are down with that, if you're interested in seeing some of that dyno stuff that I don't normally show, because a lot of times the video will just be specific to 1 or 2 or 3, whatever intake manifolds that I'm going to test. And we don't include all of them. And even if we did, we usually compare them like we did the cylinder heads. Hey, we did this cylinder head versus the stock one, and then this cylinder head versus the stock one, and so on and so on. But you don't really see how does the AFR head compare to the trick flow head, or how does the GT40 head compare to the World Products Windsor Junior head, or that kind of thing. And, so if I have access to that data, I can show you guys while we're doing our live feed. Yes, please show all that you can. Go through your thousands and thousands of dyno polls and compare everything, right? That would be a lot harder to do. So how's our poll doing? 92%. So I'm thinking that's probably a yes for people wanting to see stuff. The intake manifold is really, really nice looking, and it performed pretty well. I mean, it made good power, as you would expect it would. And honestly, on a cammed LS3, I don't think that we did that thing justice, because I think that's what I ran it on. Let's see here. Yeah, I think I ran all the EFI manifolds on the cammed one, on the cammed LS3, which is, not really enough to do it justice, because the intake manifold would support obviously an awful lot more power, more than 100 or 150 or 200 more than we were producing with that cammed LS3. Because, at a little over 600 horsepower or whatever, it's not taking advantage of everything that intake manifold has to offer. So I'm looking up the big intake test. Keglodon's there. Big LS3 EFI intake test. Good stuff. Ollie low rise, Speedmaster. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I don't think I did. I think I ran that on the stroker, because I think I got that. I think that one came in late, is what happened, if I remember right. Fast adjustable manifold, very cool. Carb LS3 intake test. I don't know. I'll have to look up I'll have to figure out which one we use on that. But we know that manifold will support lots of power. The guys that design the manifold are pretty sharp at what they do. And so it'd be interesting to see how that, because it's a, it's a tunnel rammy, big lid, throttle opening, it's fairly similar anyway to the high ram. At least if you were just describing a manifold and you described what this was, you would describe them in very similar fashions. One of them, in this case, especially the PTR version, was carbon fiber. The Holly is composite, and not the Holly, the Fast is composite, but the Holly is aluminum. So you guys can argue back and forth about, heat soak and transfer and all that stuff. All of the minimally important things. So that's the video I'm working on now, is the LS7 intake test. So that should be good. So it's looking like 92% are saying yes, Richard, you probably should continue with that. So I want to keep going on that. That will be good stuff. And then I have 8,000 RPM junkyard 5.3 going up. That also made 500 horsepower, so that's coming up. And then the swapping over the Gen 5 stuff onto the Gen 4 motor, so we're going to do something on that as well. So lots of kind of cool stuff coming up. But I can't forget about the small block Chevys and Fords and big blocks and all that stuff either too. So let's see what you guys got going on tonight. Such a good looking intake manifold. I agree. The performance design was, in terms of looks, that was certainly my favorite. Although the stack injection's pretty cool too. What's the operating range of that manifold? It's going to depend on what other things that you're doing. But on the 427, it's making power up at 7,500. Yes, all of those using an elbow. I've compared on a single plane intake manifold, I've compared an elbow and a single throttle body, probably 103 or 102 millimeter throttle body, and then a 4150 4-hole throttle body without the elbow on it, and it made no difference in power. What intake is best for Gen 3 LS drag race engine? 6,500 to 7,000, 900 to 1,000 horsepower. A Fast is the best one in that RPM range. My screen's broken. I don't know what I clicked on. Well, hopefully you're going to come here and talk car guy stuff. If you're having problems viewing the show, please shut off the live feed and then come back. I have an O2 5.3 liter. What cam do I need to put 500 horsepower with a stock bottom end? To make 500 horsepower with a stock bottom end, you won't do that with a camshaft. You'll need a camshaft, an intake manifold, and headers, obviously, and ported heads to make 500 flywheel from a 5.3. Richard, have you ever tested an eBay GT45 on a small block Mopar? No, not specifically on that, because I've never run a turbo on a small block Mopar until I run the 360 Magnum that I have. But it will work the same as it works on every other small block Ford or small block Chevy or LS or anything else. Just finished installing a motor at work, 75 horsepower, 1,800 RPM, 3-phase 480. Nice. Needs a Kenny Bell boosted pump. Back to the track tomorrow, hoping the rain stays away until later in the day. Let me know what happens. Got the MSD on my LS7 Mammo version. It's wonky. Always comes loose, but makes the most power for the street. That's what I found. Have you tested other manifolds on that? The MSD is a good one, especially compared to a factory LS7 manifold. I've run that test a couple of times. Richard, what LS intake would you run on a 12-to-1 8500 track day autocross Corvette? 8500 is going to need some sort of short runner manifold. So I need to know what RPM range you're running in if you're maxing at 8500, but when you are exiting a turn, what is your, are you doing it? I mean, hopefully you, I don't know, even on an autocross course, hopefully you're have geared it so you have RPM in this thing. And do you have traction, or are you trying to limit power output down low? But it's going to be some short runner thing. It's going to be for 8500. And what LS is it? Is it an LS? Is it Cathedral Port 1? Is it an LS3? Is it an LS7 base? Which one is it? The poll should be 100%. Who would want to see the information? I know, but you know how the world is. Intake manifold attributes that made differences: plastic versus aluminum, straight versus curve runner, tapered, others. Runner length is always the biggest thing I see. Not all of us are LS fans. You don't have to be. It's still an intake manifold test still carries over to everything else. When we learn what intake manifolds do, they do that on Pontiacs or Mopars or other Chevys, Fords. Yeah, Dean, I don't think that Trinity would be a good one for your RPM range. The fast seemed to be better than the factory LS7. The MSD was better than the fast when we tested it on the LS7. But not on the Cathedral Port stuff. Not on the Cathedral stuff. More horsepower on the dyno, a whole lot more torque in the mid-range on an MSD versus a fast. L7 4500 to 8500 Z06 with Hoosier slicks. Okay, so that's like that's a real car. That's a real race car. I'll be able to better answer that after I go through all this data. But the fast one looks pretty good. I don't know if you need to fit it under a hood, though. If you need to fit it under a hood, then you're limited to things like the BTR manifolds. For 14%, yeah. We seem to get that. Judging by the comments, I get it. There are contrarians there. Oh, contrarian. I need to get back down to West Tech. I got a bunch of Pontiac stuff I need to do, like trophy 4-cylinder. Now looking back, when I did a bunch of LS7 head testing. We ran a mass single plane manifold on it. But I also ran the fast manifold on it to compare it to that mass manifold. And it did what we see on these things, made more power down low and less power at the top, which is kind of what you'd expect. But I would have liked to have seen the MSD. I don't remember if when I did that, if MSD had their manifold out yet for the LS7. I'm pretty sure that came out after the fast did. Pretty sure. Yeah, I think it was. I'll have to go back and look at the dates on those and see. Oh, so now that we're at the bottom, we can head over to live chat. Yeah, there we go. Now we're all live. So let me look up some of these dyno things here. 8500. I don't. They didn't run the They didn't run any of these things to 8500. They ran a 77 or 7800, which was on the downside of the curve on the 427. So 4500, 8500 is going to be, that's going to be a compromise. That's interesting. Definitely not an MSD. Maybe the high RAM, although it loses a lot from 4500 to 65 or 7000. No, 65 to 65 or 6800. Let's see here. I think they ran a Texas speed one. Yeah, they did. Yeah, see, Texas speed is way down through most of the curve because it's a really short runner one. It would be good above 73 or 400. So it might help if you're running to get from 7 to 8500, then you'd be okay. But I don't think that one would be the case. I don't think that would be it. Building a 6-liter 408 stroker Summit Pro LS H3 turbo cam, an operated range of 3 to 7 with twin turbos. What intake would you recommend? What head did you have on it, Marty? Yeah, Andy, we didn't do any porting on the performance design manifolds. Richard, how much did it make? Or how much did what make? 443 at the hub through a turbo 400 with an underdrive F35 cam, fast Lsxhr 102, 7.5-inch push rods. So what? Oh, an LS3. Okay. Richard, recent L7 swap into my C5 Corvette. Congratulations. That's a big step up. Every time I take a hard hit, the car goes into rep mode. Builder claims we need to swap to an LS2 throttle body. Can I get your input? I wish I could help more. you, by the way, you didn't have to supply money so that I answer your question. I try to answer every question that's out there. I don't know about if you're using a factory ECU. I don't know what's going to throw codes and make things unhappy. Isn't an LS2 throttle body going to be smaller than the LS7 throttle body? Does anybody here know? Where are my tuners that are normally here? Where's James or somebody that runs the factory stuff? They might be able to answer that. It's the same throttle body. Okay. You need the KTEC 102 specific for your C5. Is the the factory LS7 is a 90 millimeter, right? Marty, trick flow Gen X 220s. Okay, I like those heads. Those are good. I think I would put a fast on it. If you don't want to spend fast money, then I would put then you could put a truck or truck horse, a Trailblazer SS intake manifold on it. If you have two turbos, the intake manifold is not going to hold you back. I don't know what size turbos you have, and I don't know what power you're trying to make. If you're trying to max the turbos out, but you could make lots of power with that 408 and that camshaft and those heads and that intake manifold. So I think the pinout voltage might be different the way that it reads. So one's one opens in one direction, one opens in the other. The gold and silver blade, people are saying. Can you inject fuel before the intercooler? I don't know why you do that. I'd be worried about it puddling. Marty, yeah, the Lsxr intake manifold or the RT. They make the same power. So if one helps you with the throttle body position relative to accessories, they're both the same. But yeah, that's the one that I would use on anything that's sub 7,000 on a cathedral port. That's really hard to beat for average power production. Like when you try to make an 8-pin into a 6-pin, if you look it up and try to combine the two rounds and the two 3-volt references together, you think it would work, but it doesn't. They don't like you making it not stock, right? They want it to be the way that they designed it to be. As our poll, 87%, so we're down to 13, which is it got down as low as 86, so we're back up. So we see that as a positive. Yeah, Marty, the fast isn't cheap, but it does work. 6.7 Camaro Crypto also might want to reduce the throttle body opening by 3% so it doesn't go into limp mode. Yeah, I guess if it doesn't see the voltage or opening that causes that. Have you tested an Lsxhr Edelbrock cross ram intake manifold? Yes, that video is up already. You can take a look. It's up on the channel. It did well. It's just heavy, and I don't know that they offer it anymore, but it looks cool, especially in red. I think mine was black, but it looks cool in red. It looks very Ferrari-esque, and the performance was really good compared to one of the few that I've seen that's very good compared to the factory LS3. The problem it has, one, it's aluminum and it's heavy. That's two things. The other is that it was designed to put two drive-by-wire throttle bodies on it, so you got to figure out a way to X-link those and make them work. It's not insurmountable. I just ran manual throttle bodies on mine. We ran them on the dyno. Sorry, didn't understand what you'd be worried about fuel before the intercooler. If you inject fuel before the intercooler, it hits because if you've ever seen what the core looks like on an intercooler core, it's got a bunch of very small slats, but it also has a bunch of flat surface where all those slats that go through, and the fuel hits that, and all the fuel doesn't go through the intercooler. It hits any sort of liquid, hits that, and then falls down and puddles down at the bottom of the intercooler. And what that can do is, if you get any kind of backfire, it can blow it up. Richard, how many cubic inches before a single plane is better than a fast with an aftermarket LF7 head at 6,000 RPM and over? I can tell you, I can only show you on an LS7 head. Let's see here. I don't know if I did that comparison on the 468 that we had. Six two. So take a look at this EFI intake test. So look at we'll look at maybe the best single plane that I ran, which was a Edelbrock Super Victor 4500. Test description, what do we run that with? AccuFab 4500 4-hole throttle body, so it had all of the flow. I don't think the fast was any better than the stock. Adjustable long, fast, adjustable long. So on a 6.2, it's the crossover point was 6,300 between that single plane and the fast with the long runners on it. So 6,300 there, and then above that, obviously the single plane is better. But I can take a look at the. I do. This will give us the two extremes anyway. I have the 495 that I know that I did that test on. Let's see here. LS report results. Strokers. I don't know if I ran the single plane on that 427 that I had. No, that one didn't do it. So somewhere I have tunnel ram versus EFI on a 468. Will that work? Yeah, I don't have to take some more time to look it up. To see where the crossover was. I was surprised that even on that big motor, the crossover was higher than I thought it would be. Do a 454 and 468 run better with single planes over a fast at 6,000? I don't know. I have to look and see. I have to see what the crossover point is. 6,000 plus. If you were running from 6,000 to 8,000, I would pick a single plane. Yeah, 6,000 to 7,500. I would pick a single plane. Richard, the Vortex test you put up the other day was pretty cool. Correct me if I'm not wrong, but it looked like you were almost doubling the horsepower at 15 PSI and then ran into Lsxhr. We weren't quite there, and we also ran E85 on it, which E85 did nothing to the NA power, but it definitely added power I think it added 35 or 40 horsepower NA, but it won't. Superchargers don't typically do that because they have losses associated with driving the supercharger, especially if we're getting up near 900 horsepower or more. A bigger cube does lower the point, does usually lower the crossover point, but not by as much as people want. Seems a rod mod was a fluke, kind of. I don't know what you mean by that. You need to use your words. Thanks for the answers to my questions. You provided me last time on my new engine. You made me realize I need to reevaluate what my goals are. I'm not trying to do 11-to-1 compression and boost now. I just think that, you know, guys are open. They could do whatever they want, and you make more power that way if you have unlimited octane. But it's not what I would do, and I can only tell you what I would do. It's not what I would do given the limitations, and the tuning window just gets really, really narrow, and most guys are unhappy with it. And not more happy with it. Most guys are happy being able to go out and mash on the gas and have there be boost and have, you know, spin the tires or do whatever the thing that they wanted to do. They're much more happy doing that than they would trying to do that and trying to get it not to detonate and having 10 or 20 or whatever more horsepower. Nobody ever is, when they're blazing down the road or whatever, no one's ever thinking, man, this would be funner if I had 20 more horsepower. Sean, is your motor an LS3 or an LS7? Yeah, on pump gas, I would rather give up some of the 427 LS3. Okay. 715 to 730. You're not going to get there with a fast. Or I'm not going to say you're not going to. I'd be very, very surprised if you got there with a fast Lsxhr to 730 horsepower. What are the differences between the fast Lsxr intake and the Lsxrt intake and the stock truck intake? I have that video up on the stock truck intake manifold and then the fast intake manifold, and also the Trailblazer SS as in between those two on a cathedral port one. There's no difference between the Lsxr and the Lsxrt. They make the same. The power curve is exactly the same. In fact, I took the lid off of the Lsxr and put the Lsxrt lid on there, and it made no change in power, even though we changed the plenum volume. So they're the same. They just fit a different application to position the throttle body around alternators or other things like in a truck application. It is the so how do you have the LS7 fast on an LS3? Oh, because your heads are, I'm confused. It's a 427, but you have LS7 heads on it, and it's still a 427 displacement. Is it a 4100 stroke or something? Oh yeah, the LS7 fast is a lot better than the LS3 fast is. It's still not ideal, but a sleeved LS7 427. Okay, so it's a 4-inch stroke and a 4125 bore then. Hopefully, I'm hoping, rather than a 4100 bore. Okay, good. That's a better way to go, especially sleeving the block. So an LS7 headed thing with a better LS7 headed manifold, that might could get there. You'll have a better chance certainly than doing it with an LS3 version. Makes more sense to do it that way, yeah. That'll be fun. $700 horsepower in a combination that's a fun time. Have my stock Gen 6 454 at the machine shop. Goal is 900 horsepower, single turbo. They recommend I put forged pistons on my stock rods and crank. Stock rods and crank. The cam of a custom 578, 238, 234, 114. I wouldn't do that. They're putting a turbo cam in it that has a reverse split. It just makes less power. It makes less power than going the other way. I would rather have a 234, 238. They're trying to get the thing to be responsive, but a 900 horsepower turbo on a 454 that's making decent power. You didn't tell me what heads that are on this thing, but get an idea on, let's say that you only got halfway there. Let's say you only made a 450 horsepower 454, which that would be hard to do. That'd be a stock one with a decent cam in it, basically. But if you put any kind of cylinder heads on it, you're talking about it being 500 horsepower and then not taking very much boost to get there. And especially if you use an S480 or something like that, I wouldn't use that kind of cam. I would put a different cam in it. Do you think an AFR Cathedral 245 headed 441 is comparable to a Godzilla engine? I talked to Brian. I don't have any experience of the Godzilla engine, but I talked to him about what that Godzilla engine is, and he's actually not very impressed by the cylinder heads that are on the Godzilla engine. And he said if you look really closely, they look an awful lot like the heads that are on the LT motors. Richard, have you ever tested any NASCAR engines? The guys at Westech have. There have been 6 or 8 of them there that have run of different, because they make a bunch of different NASCAR engines. They make short track ones and high speed oval ones and road race ones and different classes. Like they ran one that was a work of art, but it only made like 650. And then they had other ones that made like 850 or 875 or something because they were doing oil. Lucas was doing some oil tests with those. So they have run some of those. They're older versions of the cup motors. So Andy, you're using Frankenstein heads on your 427? Our friends have an old Dodge one in a Pro 2 truck, and it makes 850 for Lucas. Okay, is that that might have been one that they got from the guys at Lucas. 9,000 RPM. Yeah, they do sound good. There's no doubt about it. Gen 3 Hemi 6.4 truck motor with a non-MDS SRT cam, board 20 over, stock 5.7 intake, exhaust manifold going into my Ram with a tune. As long as you can tune it, it should work fine. Are you putting a 6.4 cam in it? Overbuilt, what's on? What's up? I know I didn't realize on the Hemis having the problem with dropping valves and those things, or dropping seats, I think. I ran the heck out of some of them. And then after I started running the last one that I had, which it still didn't get hurt, it didn't drop a seat, but I had my fingers crossed the whole time because we were going to take those heads off and run Edelbrock heads, and then that didn't work out. M311s, I port match the Lsxhr 102. Yeah, I wouldn't think that would be enough intake manifold for that kind of cylinder head. John, you don't need a 256, 260 cam. You really don't even need a 238 cam. Is this going to be a driver, or is this a race motor, or what is it? What are you doing? If it's going in some car that you're daily driving, I'd put a small cam in it. I'd put a smaller cam in it. You'll be happy with a smaller cam. And to make 900 horsepower, you could do that with a stock motor with no cam in it at all. If I'm doing 441 with AFR 245s in a truck at 227, 245. The Trailblazer manifold is not going to hold that thing back. I don't know why you have 245s and then have such a small cam in there, unless this is a daily driver kind of thing. But that's a pretty small cam. The cam is going to be the thing that's going to be holding you back. But the manifold, that manifold, those heads will make a lot more power than that manifold will support. But you're not there with that camshaft. Andy, you have to decide the performance design intake manifold will make more than the LS3. We already saw that. But the thing you have to decide is there are other manifolds that make more power than that, as I showed in the videos. What RPM range do you want to be running this thing in? If it's only 7,000, then I probably would pick that performance design thing. If it's more than that, then I would go above that. Do you have any solid roller, hydraulic roller? Not for LS motors. Just started pouring rain. Uh-oh. Tiny red cloud dumping on my house. Just it follows you around, right? What kind of lifters you recommend for an LQ4 turbo build, stage 1 summit cam? Most people use the LS7 or Johnson lifters. Isky makes some really good ones too. Use a small one since it's a daily. Yeah, then don't worry about them. Then the Trailblazer SS is fine for that. Is there any perks to running methanol on 6-liter LS? Only if you're trying to make lots and lots of power under boost. We didn't get any gains on an NA 6-liter running E85, so I don't know that we would see much on methanol. Maybe we would see a little bit. I don't know. It didn't seem to have enough compression to take advantage of the E85. Whenever we run boosted stuff, there's definitely gains there. Would be an interesting video. It's not really. Unfortunately, on LS stuff, the 1 or 2 people that would be putting solid roller stuff in for every 10,000 or 100,000 people that would just be running hydraulic roller stuff, it's just not a big enough market for that. And anybody that's doing a solid roller is building a dedicated race motor. You're not going to be doing that for your street car. So it's just, like I said, it's just such a limited market. Would it be a good idea to run the Holly rails instead of the Corvette? This was an NA motor. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, you're not going to see a difference. We ran almost 1,000 horsepower with stock Ford modular Ford rails, which are 5/16, so they're tiny. Chad's buddy Jeff Lee here. Jeff, what's up? What are my thoughts? You got to stop saying that, man. It's a street strip car, and they also want me to put forged pistons in it because they're concerned about me blowing the ring lands off the stock Gen 3, Gen 6 454. So take a look at the stuff that we did on the junkyard motors. We've run 4-digit power levels on lots of stock stuff. I would not put a forged piston on a stock rod and think that you've cured the problem. Because you're going to break something. The only way you're going to break a piston is if you don't have enough ring gap in it. Then it's a toss-up between whether you're going to break the piston or the rod. But if you put a forged piston in it, you're definitely going to break the rod. The rod will be the thing that goes. So if you're going to put forged pistons in it, I would put pistons and rods in it, or I just wouldn't do it. You can make 900 horsepower fairly easily with a stock pistons, just ring gap, just ball hone it and put it together. And we've done it many, many times. You can take a look at the Boneyard Boost stuff. We ran Vortex on them. We run turbos on them, and they will work in that range. Ideally, forged rods and forged pistons. Keep the stock crank is fine for that power level, and it should last a really long time. The only time I don't recommend that is when a guy's trying to do that in a boat where he might be running at wide open throttle for minutes at a time, roaring across the lake. Then you got to have some beefy stuff. Lifters really concern me. I've never had a lifter problem other than on these really high mileage things where one rotated because of the lifter tray went bad after, I don't know, 300,000 or 400,000 miles. I can't really blame it for that. I bought a used piston from Lizzie Musey at NPK event. No prep. It's like palming a basketball for how big it is. Yeah, what size motor that was she running? Ever built an Oldsmobile motor under boost? I've never put together any Oldsmobile. Exactly, Sean. Would 50-pound injectors will support 800 horsepower NA, so that's enough. Time for a Gen 6 454 Big Bang. I agree. I have one sitting there. If I could just get it to make more power on the top. Acquired a 2007 L92 6.2. Do they have valve dropping issues? No, they don't. That's not an LS7 headed motor. The LS3 stuff is fine. 959 cubic inches. Yeah, that's definitely a big block. Yeah, Joe, I don't know why it's not 100%. And ET, the adapter thing has, I don't know that I've tested LS3 to LS7. Every other time I've tried adapters, they don't work. Or it makes less power than it would if you had the combination without adapters. Yeah, if you have a 960-inch motor running to high RPM, but you can't run high RPM because the motor's too big, because the stroke's too big, right? Unless it's a long rod motor. But they run RPM in them, and they make lots of power. Almost by design. $9,500 RPM. Yeah, that's a lot. And I don't know if Lizzie is that a nitrous motor? Because that'd be even better. That'd be even more of a reason to have gigantic ports in it, just so that you could have the amount of nitrous and fuel that they're flowing displaces a lot. So you could up the size of that on like absolute combinations like that. I still want to hear back from the guy from England that's saying how we get a lot more power with nitrous by basically they're injecting it as a liquid and then keeping it in a liquid state until it's injected, like basically right at the valve or something, and so that we're not displacing a bunch of stuff. Yeah, ET. I just have not. I mean, I've done cathedral to wreck and wreck to cathedral, and it's just because I was hoping the way back when I first did this, I was hoping that the LS3 intake manifold, as good as it is, would be the answer to all of our prayers for the cathedral port stuff, and guys could use that manifold with adapters, but it just makes less power. Kind of want a dual plane performer RPM on my Lsxhr 454. I don't know that that's enough manifolds for that. James, I don't know what the difference is between the LS7 lifter. I don't know. I haven't taken apart and measured it. I don't know if the I'm wondering if the plungers are different, if the oil orifice size is different. The LS2 intake does well on larger cubic inch engines. I haven't seen that. All the LS2 intake manifold has is a big opening. Otherwise, it's not very good. The LS7 lifter just uses a lighter ball. That's the only change. They didn't change the flow orifice. They didn't change the plunger. So I'm going to go ahead and close our poll at 88%, meaning 12%. You guys disappoint me. Why can't you be happy with the Trailblazer manifold? It does work really well. LS7 lifter just uses a different ball per my GM mole back in the day. Okay. I'll bet Brian's taken those apart. I don't think I ever have. $12,000 for an Oldsmobile block? That's like baller status. That's big money. 2 more minutes. Dos minutos más, por favor. Got my little fan going, but it is hot up here. When will there be more videos on your car? Mark, what's up? I know I do need to come down there. I can't go until maybe the middle of next week. No dual plane for the L7 heads. Yeah, I don't. They nobody probably would make that because I think that the market is pretty small for that. The LS2 intakes didn't like the same cam timing, so it's the wrong cam. I've tried LS2 intake manifolds versus LS6 and Trailblazer SS, and I've tried it on a few different combinations, and it's never done as well as the other manifolds with any of the different cams that I've tried with it, and it just makes less power than the LS6. At least it has, and more than and less than the Trailblazer SS. Sean, if that's directed at me, lucky for me, they've already run the test, so I don't have to worry about it dropping a valve. And it's not a factory. They didn't use it. Oh, they did use a factory head. It's a ported factory head, I think. $112. That's pretty warm. 122 would be really warm. That's pretty toasty. We took the little doggies swimming today. They love it. Brought tennis balls over so we could throw them in and they could jump in and swim around. Still teaching them how to swim a little bit. They're still wanting to drop their butts. Try to touch the bottom. But they get it most of the time. They don't like it when we swim out there. They always try to jump in and save us. Yeah, ET. There's definitely more LS3 stuff than there is. LS7 is a much smaller market. $800 and $1,200 are both doable on certainly on methanol. And that combination can be reliable because you can make 1,200 with a fairly mild camshaft, just with the right turbo or turbos, or twin turbo, so that with the right turbos on there. And then making the power is usually the easy part. So then the other stuff, your 1200 horsepower transmission and drive shaft and rear end and all that stuff. Yep. Now you have LS7 heads, right? But the good thing is there are good intake manifolds available for those. If you're running fuel injection, an MSD intake manifold, the fast manifold, all of that stuff works pretty well. There are single plane manifolds for the LS7, but I don't think I'd put that in the street car. I would rather run one of those long runner deals. You could, if you want a carbureted one, see if Holley or somebody has a low ram with a removable lid, and then put the lid on that has a dual quad, and then you could run a dual quad manifold on there. It wouldn't be perfect, but it still would be kind of cool. Where are you at, Eric? Kyle, 15 to 20 psi is a big spread. It's another 50% of power. It's quite a bit. And the boost is not what I'm concerned with. What I need to know is what's the NA power output, because twin GT35s are about 1,000 horsepower, 1,100 horsepower. So depending on the power that you want to make. Summertime in northern Michigan. Alabama. Okay. It's cold up there though. One more minute. Probably more than 2 minutes had already gone by. I'm not real good at time. I'd like to see an LS with 4 IDAs. I've never run Weber's on it, just the stack stuff. And on that note, it is time to go. But I will see everybody tomorrow, and hopefully I will have the LS7, because now we have to, even though we had 12% or 13% dissenters. Now I have to do the intake manifold test video, which I was going to do anyways. I'll see you guys all tomorrow.